Greetings, pilgrims. Welcome back to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage. And today is the episode you've all been waiting for. We are going to officially start writing some networking code. I know, fireworks and all that jazz. Let's get started. We got a lot to cover, so it's going to be a little bit quicker pace today, but don't you worry. I'm going to show you everything we need to know. First and foremost, I wanted to show you what you're seeing in front of you here. This is a little tool that I've been developing. We're going to talk about this much more later on, but this will be available on Discord, and I will be referring to this as we go through these episodes to help you correlate some of these ideas, some of these functions and all the different things happening with networking to a real-world example. Very briefly up front, PUN networking and networking in general is sort of like a movie theater. This is something we're all familiar with, right? You go to the movie theater, and as you can see here, outside the building, I buy my ticket. I go into the building, into the movie theater as a whole, and then I'm in the lobby, and then from a lobby I can go into a room being one individual theater, and there are seats, and we can think of that as like the number of players in that room, right? And then when we're done with that room, with that match, we return to the lobby. So it's not a perfect example, but it is a pretty good correlation, and these setup here has been verified by some of the experts in our forum, so I'd like to take a moment to thank Duck and Big Shot Gaming Mike. Those guys especially have been a lot of help with this. So we'll talk about this a lot more as we use it in the future. But for now, I just wanted to introduce it. You'll see this example here. And on the left and right here, you'll see the functions. And as I click on them, the camera will move and show you this is that function. And at the bottom here, I'm going to be adding some text that will explain in technical detail what that function is. Sounds good? So for today, we're going to go over the first two in our list here. We're going to be doing the connect using settings and the on connected to master. And we're not quite going to get to the lobby today, joining in. We're going to go through a loading screen first to kind of put a little bit of a nice flashy veneer on our game, but also give it a chance to load some of that background information that it needs. So for today, we're just going to talk about these first two here, and what does it mean to connect using settings? How do we get to on connected to master? But by the end of this episode, you will officially have written code and get yourself connected to the PUN servers, and we'll be online officially, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to drop this out, and here we are. So this is our project just as we left it before. If I look at all of this, I've got nothing in here. Now, I do have some folders here that shouldn't be here, so let me delete that really quick. I'm sorry, I've done this a couple times for you. So let me get rid of the scenes folder. So there, now it's just like it was before, promise. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create 4 scenes and 1 script. We're only going to use 2 of these scenes today, but we will use them more as we go forward. We're just going to create them up front, and then the 1 script, okay? So in our scenes folder, I'm going to right-click and create a new folder and call it PUN. So inside the scenes folder, anything that is a PUN scene related to our networking, we're going to put in here. I'm going to right-click and say create scene. And I'm not going to bother giving a name just yet. I'm going to click over here. And I'm going to click on it again. I'm going to hit Control-D on the keyboard 1, 2, 3 times. So this will be our 4 scenes that we need. So the first scene is going to be called Player Login. And you can change the name just by clicking once. It highlights. Click again. And it will change to this. And you can see now it gives me the cursor to type. So now I can type in here. Next one is going to be Player Lobby. Click on this one. Click it again. I'm going to call this one loading screen, like that, S-C-R-E-E-N. There we go. And then click on this last one that says new scene, and let's change this to game scene. Okay? So we were going to go from player login to our loading screen to our player lobby. Think of this like when you load into PUBG or Fortnite, you see your character in the middle of the screen, and you have all your options. That's your player lobby. And then from there, we're going to go to the game scene. When we choose our option and we hit play, and it finds a match and puts us in with other players to play with, that's going to be our game scene. Now, very important step. Don't forget this. Let's go up and let's go into our build settings. And we're going to add these to our build settings. So ignore these. I had these here before. There we go. So it'll look just like this. And we need to add them to the build order. What this means is even though we're not going to be using the scene necessarily, sometimes it needs to be here in order for us to reference the fact that we're going to be loading a scene, and we will load these in this order. So the order is very important here. So player login is going to go first. Then we're going to have the loading screen is going to be next. And you'll notice the numbers here. In most programming languages, and in the way that we count, it goes from 0 is the first entry. So 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So you hear me say something is 0 indexed. That's what this means. As opposed to 1 indexed, we start with 1, 2, 3. See? So our player login is our 0 scene. This is the very first thing that's going to come up. And this is going to be our screen that's going to have our fancy graphics, the name of the game, and it will say put in your username and enter. And we're going to code it today to make sure that if you've already logged in once before, it'll just skip that part for you, okay? But then from there, the next one in sequence, the scene 1, is going to be our loading screen. So this has to be in here before we can move forward, okay? So there we go. We've closed that off. Sounds good. Now, let's go to our player login scene and open that up. Now, it looks exactly the same as it just was because it's a totally blank scene. But we can confirm here. It says player login. Before we go any further, of course, it's a good reminder to save your progress. Save my project. There we go. Just so we're good with what we got. Now, we need to set up this scene so that we can have some things to interact with in order to do our login. Specifically, we're going to need an input field where we're going to type in our name, and then a button to say, okay, that's my name. Let's go ahead and start playing. All right. So to start with, I'm going to right click and say UI canvas. We're going to create a canvas because we're going to put UI elements on the screen. We need to set a couple of things up over here. Over here under my canvas scaler, I'm going to change this constant pixel size to scale with screen size. And I'm going to set my reference resolution to 1920 by 1080. Full 1080p is what I want. Okay, done with that. Now a neat trick, what I'm going to do is take the event system, which we need to handle events like clicking and dragging and that sort of thing for our canvas. I'm just going to click and drag and drop it under the canvas. This means that if I collapse this, you see the canvas is one nice, tidy, neat little package. And anywhere I move it to, all the stuff underneath of it is going to come with it, including the all-important event system. Now, I'm going to click on my canvas and I'm going to right-click and say UI. And I'm going to make an image. I'm going to rename this image to, say, background. I'm going to set my scaling here. So I'm going to click on my rect transform right in the center. And in the bottom corner here, I'm going to click that. Then I'm going to hold Alt, and you see how it changes. So it's going to stretch all the way to the edges of my screen. I'm going to click it again, and now it's completely stretched. Perfect, thank you. And I'm going to change my color to black, just because we're going to do white buttons with black text, and so it just makes it look nice. Now over here, I'm going to organize this a little bit better, and I'm going to put this underneath of canvas, but above the event system. The event system I want to be heavy, quote unquote, and be all the way at the bottom all the time. Now, right-click on my background, and I'm going to say UI, and we want our input field that we talked about. This means that the input field is on top of the background, and that way we can see it. You see it there, right? Let's rename this. I'm going to rename this to INP for input field underscore, and we're going to call this player name. Very cool. Now, what we need to do is set a couple of settings here. First of all, our size, it's a little small for our screen. Like that's way too small, right? So up here in my rect transform, the width, I'm going to set that to 300. And the height, I'm going to set it to 50. Nice and big. Now, if I expand it over here in the hierarchy, I'm going to choose placeholder. This is the text that appears before you type anything. Right now it says enter text. We're going to say enter username. We're going to change our size to 24. And under the paragraph alignment, I'm going to choose the middle option for both. Just like how nice and centered that makes it. And there we go. So it says enter a username, please. So now if we just run it right now, I just want to show you what this does. That text is there until I start typing something. Once I start typing something, now it becomes whatever I've typed. All right, sounds good. Now for that text that we typed though, we need to set the settings for that. So I'm going to click the word text underneath, and here the same kind of settings. We don't want anything here because this is what we're going to type in, right? But we do need to change the font size to 24, and again, center alignment for both. There we go. Now if we hit play, it'll say enter a username, and then I'm going to say Matt. Cool, right? Okay, so now it's not going to do anything yet because we need a button. So let's add a button next. I'm going to collapse my input. I'll right click and say UI, and let's choose a button. Now you can see here that it got put underneath, so I'm just going to drag that out. So I want to make sure that it is definitely a child of just the canvas, but not inside. Come on, not inside the input field. I don't want you to do that. Well, we'll do that for now. There you go. So just the button at the same level. Oh, I see what happened. They put it underneath the background. Don't really want that to be a child of the background. There we go. So you can click and drag these things around. Just make sure that it is canvas. And then under the canvas at the same organization here is background. And on top of that is input field. On top of that is button. But these things should not be inside one another. Okay. So now our button, let's rename this BTN. That's shorthand for button. And this button is going to be submit. Now, again, it's small and it's in the wrong place. So let's also set this to 300 by 50. Same size. But then in the position here, let's do a -60. And that's just going to move it down a little bit, as you can see here, just underneath, nice and lined up. So let's open up our button and let's change the text. I don't want it to say button. I want it to say submit. And what I want to do is change the font size here again to 24. There we go. Now I'm going to save, just because we've done some work here, and I'm going to hit play. And again, this won't do anything yet. So if I put my name in and I hit submit, I can click it all day and it doesn't do anything. Because if I click on my button here and I look at my settings over here, you'll see under the on click, there's nothing here. List is empty. So what we're going to do later is we're going to add an event here to say, when I click, do something. And that's the code we're going to get to right now. Okay, so when we click on this button, it's going to run this code. And we're also going to do the same thing for the input field. If you look here, it has a thing that says on value changed, right? So it takes this input as a string, like it says here. And when we change that value, we also want to run some code and do something, right? We want to capture what you've typed in as your name. And then when I click submit, I want to send that to Unity and say, okay, now send this and be a part of the networking. Okay, cool. So we'll save. Now let's go to our assets, our scripts folder, pardon me. Right click and we're going to say create script. And I'm going to call this launch manager. So when we're launching the game, we're launching into the game, this is the script we're going to use. Now also in my scene here, I'm going to again put my event system under my canvas. And we can close that all up like that. See how that's all one nice little package. That's just how we want it. Down here, I'm going to right click and say create empty. I'm going to reset the transform. So you click these three little dots and click reset, and that will put everything at 0, 0, 0 and 1, 1, 1 scale. Doesn't really matter for an object like this, as you'll see, but I just like to be organized. And again, I'm going to call this object launch manager, but I'm going to spell it correctly. Launch manager. So this is the launch manager that's going to be in the scene, and we're going to click and drag and drop to attach the launch manager script. Okay? You'll see a lot of this throughout the whole series where we make, these are called managers. So it's an invisible object that floats in the scene and it holds some logic that we can refer to. Think of it kind of like a satellite. You can't see it, but you can bounce things off of it. You can ask it for information. It's that kind of thing. It's there. You won't really see it, but we can get information from it. And we can use it to send information to other things, which we're about to see. So let's go ahead and launch it. So you can launch it by double-clicking it here, or you can double-click it here. You see where it says Launch Manager Script. Not that, but where it says Script and it's kind of grayed out. And right here, if I double-click that, it'll also launch the script. Okay? So that's coming up. I'm going to scroll down my notes a little bit here. So in the interest of time, because this is going to be a long episode, I am going to copy and paste code that I've already written. But don't worry, I'm going to explain every block that we do. It just saves a little bit of time. Every second is precious from typing it all out, and there's no mistakes and that kind of thing. Okay? So at the very top here, what we need to do is we need to add two using statements. And what these are is these are pre-built groups of functions and code that we can refer to. So my example is if you wrote, say, a calculator, right? Then you wouldn't have to have in every script, here's how a calculator works. Now I can use my calculator to say what's 2 plus 2. You've written it once, you're going to include it by using a using statement to say, I will be using this pre-built chunk of stuff that I made. Okay, so we're going to add two of those. So we're going to add photon.pun and photon.realtime, just like this. Capital P, capital R, just like that. So now we can access all of the stuff that PUN has already put together for us, right? Now we do need to make a change to our script here at the top, the public class. It can no longer be a mono behavior only. We need to change this. So I'm going to highlight this and change it to mono behavior PUN callbacks. So just like this, capital P, capital C, callbacks, plural. Okay. Now what this means is it's just like a mono behavior, but now it also can get callbacks from PUN, meaning I send out a ping for information and it calls me back with information, right? You call somebody and say, hey, let me know when you get home. you call and say, yo, okay, I got home safe. Thanks for checking. Something like that, right? So this will allow us to do that for PUN-specific functions, right? Sounds good. Now, we're going to add some variables. I'm going to show you how this works. So let's do copy and paste. So variables, we're going to set up a static so that we can call this script from anywhere. So what that means is we're going to type this, public static launch manager, and then we're going to call it instance. And what this means is anywhere else in our program, we can just say launch manager.instance. And from wherever we are, we're going to be able to refer to this specific script, this exact script file we're working on right now, which means we can get access to anything within it by doing this. And we'll see much later why this is very important, but we'll just leave that here for now. A public string username, this is going to be just a scratch paper for us as we're trying to figure out what we want our character name to be. And a boolean to say whether or not we want to clear our preferences. We'll get to more on that in a moment. Okay. Now, we do need to do two things that we don't have already. One is we're going to introduce the idea of regions. So a region is a way that you can collapse code. I'll show you quickly here. Region, and I call this test. And then down here, if I say end region. Now, anything I put in between these, any amount of text I put at all, anything at all, if I click here on the outer edge here to collapse that region, everything inside of it just down to a single spot. It's perfect for organizing code. So now that we have that complete, now that we know what a region is, we're going to put some code in here. I'm going to begin a region called Unity methods. So this is going to be anything that is Unity specific. In essence, we're going to do the awake function. The awake function here, so void awake, just like that, is similar to start, but this happens even before start, okay? So in here, we're going to have an if statement, if clear pref. So if we have checked this checkbox, we're going to call a function called delete player prefs. We're going to get to that in a moment. So just for now, all you have to know is if I check this checkbox, we're calling this function, which we're going to write in a bit. Also in awake, we're going to say, hey, set our username variable, which remember is our scratch paper, to just something. We're going to call it username for now. And then right here, these two lines are the continuation of what we started up here. We're going to say instance equals this. So if anybody calls launch manager.instance, they are referring to this script. And then we want to add this line to say don't destroy on load, meaning when you load something new, don't destroy this .gameObject. Now, if you remember in our scene, we created an object called launch manager, and we put this script we're writing on it. So it's going to say this script, what object is it on? That launch manager script. Okay, don't destroy it ever. Leave it alone. Okay, sounds good. Now, let's move on to our start function. Our start function, we're going to change it up a little bit from doing nothing to doing, something. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'm going to paste. Now, in our start function, we're going to say if, we're going to start talking about the idea of player preferences, okay? So player preferences is a part of Unity, and we can have strings, we can have integers, and we can have, I believe, strings, integers, and booleans perhaps, but we're only going to be using strings for now. And you can put in a key into player prefs. So we're going to call this key player name. We're going to say if, and now this is a little confusing, the exclamation mark in front of this means if not. So if you do not go into the player prefs and ask has key, like has cheeseburger, has key player name, is there something called player name in player prefs? If not that, so if that doesn't exist, here's what I want you to do. So what I want you to do is photonnetwork.nickname. This is the name that you are called when you're online. Okay, so this is the difference between, say, an account name and games like, say, Among Us, which is popular right now, that you can change your username every time you play the game. So that would be your nickname for that session, right? And we're just going to get some information from literally the computer you're using and just come up with a name. It's going to be garbage name. We're going to get rid of it. But just if you don't already have a name in storage, we have to call you something for right now. And remember our scratch paper variable here, we're going to say, let's just set that equal to this name that we just came up with. Okay? Else means if you do have a key called player name, well, all right then, let's just store that from, so get string, you can get player name and store it to our scratch paper variable. So if you don't have a name, make one up. If you do have a name, go ahead and save it. I'm going to call this function called load settings. More on that in a moment. Don't worry about that. Now, as we saw up above, we had a function that we are calling. If we set that variable true for clear pref, saying I want to clear out my preferences, because this is a utility for us to test that our preferences are working. This will be removed by the end of the whole project, but just, this is here for us for today. So down here, let's create that function. Public void delete player prefs. There it is. Player prefs.delete all. That means just clear everything out. I want to start over. Okay? The update we're actually going to skip. We're not doing anything in update right now. And then let's go ahead and do an end region. So this is, as you saw, we were doing a lot of region stuff. So up here, we started our region for Unity methods. So that's done. So now we can collapse that whole region and look at that. It all goes away. So now we can collapse our big long scripts into just tiny little bits and just focus on what we want to see. For now, it's okay. It's not going to be that long. Okay. So now that we're done with this region, let's go ahead and we're going to start another region called public methods, and we're going to start putting in some methods for that. So I'm going to put this in here, enter space. So region public methods. So these are not Unity specific things, but these are functions that are going to be called from all over the place. So again, we called our load function, or load settings rather, up here. So now we're going to create the function for load settings right here. Public void load settings. If player prefs has key player name. So this is very similar to this line, but just the opposite. This says if you don't have a player name, this says, okay, if you do have a player name, then your nickname is going to be equal to that player name. And then we're going to go ahead and connect to Photon servers, which we'll write that function in a moment. And then Photon network.load level 1. Remember earlier when we did our build settings, 0 and 1. 1 was our loading screen. So that's what we're going to load here. So you'll notice that in the start, this says, if you have a name, if you don't have a name, make one up. If you do have a name, do this, and then just load settings. So what's going to happen here is, if I don't have a name, it's going to make one up, but it's going to call this function anyway. And when I come here, it's going to say, well, I don't have a name. You already asked me that, right? So this function is going to literally do nothing if you don't have a name. And that's on purpose, because then that's where our input field and our button come into play, okay? It's a little confusing to see it here, but once you see it work, you'll get it, okay? All right, next function. Let's keep moving here. Gonna go ahead and paste this guy in. So this guy is public void connect to Photon servers. Now this is a function, it sounds very PUN-like, but it's a function we wrote called connect to Photon servers, and all it's gonna say is, if not, see the exclamation mark there, if not Photon network.is connected, are we connected? Are we not connected? Then let's go ahead and connect. I'm just going to remove that, I like to keep things organized. So Photon network.connect using settings. Remember that was the first function we looked at in our PUN feeder example. Okay, so that gets called in here, as you see. So if we already have a name, we're all good. Let's just use the name and let's go ahead and connect. So this is the part where you won't even see anything happen. If you have already logged in, it'll just take you right to the loading screen. Okay, next function, please. We're moving along. Here we go. Next one up. This one is called input name. So this is going to be where we actually type in our character name into that input field. This is the function that's going to call, right? So we're going to say input name, public void, string player name. So we're going to create a variable called player name. And this string, we're going to first check and say, is this string null or empty? Meaning, has the player typed nothing yet? If they've typed nothing yet, then just return. Say, go back. I don't care. But if we have typed something, if this is something, we will drop out of this. And we're going to store that name onto our scratch paper variable that we've been using. Okay? So that's all this is going to do. We're going to connect this to that input name. And when we type our name, it's going to go ahead and fill in this variable. Okay? Very good. Let's move on. We got one more. And then we'll end this region. So we'll do that all at the same time. There we go. So this next function here is called set player name. This is going to happen when we click the button. Okay? I'm going to get rid of this because we don't need this for right now. Don't want to confuse you. So set player name is going to be called when we press the button. So again, we have a variable called player name. And we're going to say, hey, set the string of player name. So go to our preferences and find the key called player name and set it equal to what we have chosen as our username. Set our nickname, remember the name for this session, to be that as well. There's another preference we're going to come to in another episode, but while we're here setting preferences, setting an int, see, we can do strings and ints, called your rank, and we're going to set it to a value of 1. So when you start a brand new character, you'll have a rank of 1, similar to like prestiging in COD, you can say, 1 to 50, whatever. Then, now that we've pressed the button and we've stored the name that we're going to use, just like up here, we're going to connect to Photon servers and load level 1, just like that, okay? So now that we've finalized our name, we're good to go. And then we're going to end that region. So that region here is for our public methods. These are public because other scripts are going to be able to access them, but they're not specifically Unity and they're not specifically PUN. So now let's get into the specifically PUN stuff, right? Now we need to do some networking stuff now that we've figured out our name. So we're going to start a new region called PUN callbacks, and I'm going to paste that right in here. So new region, PUN callbacks, just like this, capital all PUN, and then capital C, callbacks, plural. Public override void on connected. So now the overrides mean I'm going to call an existing function that PUN has written, and I want to override it. And what that means is I want you to do all the same things you normally do, and I want you to do this. Think of it like this. Most of us have a normal routine in our day, right? Either you go to school, you work, whatever. You get up at a certain time, you do whatever. Like for me, I get up early in the morning, I take the dogs for a walk, I feed them, I check on my wife, I get in the shower, I get dressed, I get ready to start working, right? So imagine if that was my function called normal day. If I want to override that, I'd say, but today I have a doctor's appointment. So I need to do all those things, and I'm going to do something different. So still all the same stuff happens, but I'm interjecting some new content, okay? So we're going to override an existing function from PUN called onConnected. The only change we're making is that we're going to do a debug log to the console so we can see proof, evidence of what's happened. So what's going to happen is we're going to do all the same stuff they do, and I'm just going to say, hey, get whatever nickname it is that for my name for this session, and paste out has connected to the Photon servers. So for me, it'll say Matt has connected to Photon servers. We'll see that in a little bit, okay? Now, just two more, and then we're ready to rock and roll here. Paste one more function here. Override void on connected to master. So the on connected means I'm connected to PUN services sort of in general, and then on connected to master means I'm now connected to the master server. So this is kind of like once you're connected to the master server, you're sort of online, but you're not on a specific website yet, if that makes sense. So you're connected to the internet. Now you can go anywhere, right? So, and then once we start joining specific rooms and lobbies, those are like the websites that we go to. So we go from being connected to the master to our room or a lobby. That's when we narrow the beam a bit more specifically. So here, debug log, my nickname has connected to the master server. Very similar to that one. All right, last function, and we're going to end our region. Let's go ahead and paste this guy in here. So here we go. We've got override void on disconnected. Now, this looks a little funky, but I'll walk you through it. We're overriding again, so this is a normal function. Disconnect cause is something that PUN has created, and they have a cause, meaning why did you disconnect? Were you kicked? Were you banned? Did you just choose to turn off? Did you lose power? What happened, right? So you don't have to worry about this line. This is a little confusing to explain right now, but the debug log cause, it'll tell us what was the cause for our disconnection, okay? And then we end our region. And that's all the code we need to write. So let's go ahead and hit save. I hope that made sense. I know it's a lot, but it makes sense if you follow it just piece by piece. Let's go back to Unity and click once, let it compile. Should be good. And we can tell that we're good by clicking on our launch manager, and we see some stuff appear here now. So you'll see this username. Remember, that was our scratch paper. We'll see this get populated with things. And then our clear prefs is our checkbox to say whether or not we want to clear our preferences. So I'm going to check that for now. Excuse me. Now, if I go to input name, we're going to need to add something here to say when we type a name in, right? So I'm going to click the plus to say I do want to add an event. And you'll see here a couple of things. Runtime only, you can leave that alone. This one is looking for an object. So I'm going to click and drag my launch manager right there. And now you see this lights up and it says, okay, what do you want me to do from this? Well, this has that script on it. So I can drop this down and choose launch manager. And holy cow, look at all this stuff, right? So we want to choose input name. I believe it's this one, but we'll double check together. Input name. And we want to choose that. We'll run that function, right? We'll check it in a moment. I could be wrong about that. It could be the one down here, but I believe it's the one above here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. Then let's go to our button, submit. Same thing, on click. What do we want to do? Well, I want you to do a new thing here. And the new thing I want you to do is from the launch manager. I want to choose launch manager. And there's only one here called set player name with the string. Okay? So now, if I hit save, and let's take a look at our console. So because we're going to see messages appear here. And let's hit play and see what happens. Now, right away, we're not going to see anything. And if I click on my launch manager, which is underneath our don't destroy on load. Remember we said, when I launch this, when I play this, I don't want you to destroy anything in here. Launch manager, let's click it. What had happened? Look, this got filled in. Blue, system product name, system manufacturer. So blue is the name of my computer because the light in it is blue. And then it just has this other stuff that I didn't specify beyond that I want you to start coming up with the name of my Asus board or my 1080, whatever the card is in there. So it came up with this garbage name for me right now. That's perfect. We just need something in that field, right? Now I'm going to click in here and I'm going to put my name in, Matt. And notice, look, it updated my username when I typed in here, right? Because that function is getting called on my input field and it's saving that. Now I'm going to hit submit. And now, what happened? My screen went away. Well, if you'll notice, up here on the left, we're on the loading screen. We loaded the next level, the next scene. And look down here, the very exciting news. Matt has connected to the Photon servers. Matt has connected to the master server. I am officially online. Okay? Awesome, right? So let's go ahead and stop this. Now, here's the exciting part. I'm going to uncheck clear prefs. I'm going to say, I don't want you to clear my preferences anymore. I've already logged in once. Save it. Don't bother me with this again, right? And you'll notice also here it says disconnected by client logic, meaning I chose to disconnect because I stopped playing the game. So now we're going to clear this and I'm going to hit play and watch this. Boop. I'm automatically logged in. My name is Matt. And look, Matt has connected to Photon servers. Matt has connected to master server. And I'm on the loading screen, which means once you've logged in once, unless you clear your preferences, it remembers that. And the scripting we did together today will say, if you already have a name, don't bother asking me for it. It's already set. Look it up and just log me in with that name. So congratulations. You are connected to PUN services. You are online. And I thank you so much for joining me, guys. Don't forget, ask in the Discord if you guys need help. There will be a link to the PUN Theater. As I update that, that'll be available for you guys as a tool. Also, don't forget to join me. I will be streaming a lot more. I'm trying to get back into streaming. So as I work on these things in the advance, you guys can come and see kind of a sneak peek of what's coming. Ask questions, stop on by, say hello, just for fun. If you have a chance to join us, that'd be great. And that's all for this episode, guys. I hope you have very much enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, guys, keep practicing, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.